Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I can hear lots of friends. I might not identify you all, so don't worry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do a tour around the various bits of my life where I picked up songs and how they've influenced me and how I think where I think they come in the sort of folky traditions. And you'll hear a few Irish tunes because it's St. Patrick's night. And I realised I'd spent more time uh, learning sort of English songs and more time learning Irish tunes. So, and then we might have time to say hello to my concertina, which is a bit different to other concertinas, or to a lot of other concertinas. So, um, the first song I thought I would sing, it comes from the music hall tradition, and it's a song that I always called Workhouse, and I've kind of made it into a sort of London song, a bit like the Hours is in Between and songs like that. Some people might think, oh, that's not folk music, but in fact, it is about kind of people's way of life and where people are either oppressed and they're laughing at themselves and that kind of thing. Um, the workhouse works very well, and it kind of sits in a whole lot of songs that are talking about your way of life. The other reason why I've chosen it is because in the 80s, I used to do disability gigs, and they used to have a cabaret that they called the Workhouse. And so it just seemed an absolutely appropriate song to sing then. And I'm accompanying myself on the concertina. There are lots of nice houses down our street. Houses what are very clean and neat. There's houses what are small, houses what are tall, houses what ain't really houses at all. Well, our house is the first house, and then comes a Mr. Waterhouse's house. After Waterhouse's house and our house, then comes Waterhouse's daughter's house. And after Waterhouse's daughter's house, there's a picture house, a public house, a slaughterhouse. And in case you wants to know, the last house of the row is everybody's house, 'cause it's the workhouse. There's a nice house, belongs to Mr. Whitehouse. It's got water running round it like a lighthouse. Then there's number 24, the number on the door. Trouble is you can hardly tell the ceiling from the floor. Well, our house is the first house, and then comes a Mr. Waterhouse's house. After Waterhouse's house and our house, then comes Waterhouse's daughter's house. And after Waterhouse's daughter's house, there's a picture house, a public house, a slaughterhouse. And in case you wants to know, the last house of the row is everybody's house, 'cause it's the workhouse. When the man comes round for rent on rent day, you should do what all the people have to say. He was in a strife, running for his life. Whitehouse chased him with a carving knife. Our house is the first house, and then comes a Mr. Waterhouse's house. After Waterhouse's house and our house, then comes Waterhouse's daughter's house. And after Waterhouse's daughter's house, there's a picture house, a public house, a slaughterhouse. And in case you want to know, the last house of the row is everybody's house, 'cause it's the workhouse. Now that song was a very good song to do with sign language interpretation. If you do anything too abstract with sign language interpretation, it can be a problem. Um, and they used to do when I was doing the house and making it go higher and higher each chorus. They'd make a house with their hands and shoot it up into the air and things like that. Um, the the other, I'm going to go to a completely different aspect of folk song now. Um, there was the folk songs, of course, that Cecil Sharp collected, and he collected not only folk songs, but he collected dances as well from the rural communities of Somerset and various parts of various different counties. Um, he avoided the towns, although in this country we'd had an industrial revolution and there's plenty of more urban songs, which are brilliant folk songs. Cecil Sharp enjoyed or felt moved to visit rural communities, and um, he the first song that um, people say he collected, and it's probably the case, collected about four or five thousand songs, and the reason why he collected all these. No, what I was going to say was that he collected about 4 or 5 thousand songs, um, but he insisted on getting them from people from rural communities, and then setting them to music with his uh, friends and playing them with and for the great and the good in drawing rooms and things. Um, this practice was later carried on by people who made them into art songs, people like Benjamin Britten and Vaughan Williams, whom the library is dedicated to at Cecil Sharp House. Anyway, this first song is called The Seeds of Love, and it um, it uh, it was collected from a village I always say called Ha Hambridge, making sure that you know there's an H on the beginning of it, so it doesn't sound like anything else. And it was uh, collected from somebody called John England, who was a gardener, I assume, to somebody in a large house. Um, and it's called The Seeds of Love, and it's rather beautiful. Um, and it goes like this. I sowed the seeds of love, and I sowed them in the spring. I gathered them up in the morning so soon, while the sweet birds sweetly sing, while the small birds sweetly sing. I planted my garden well, with flowers everywhere. I had not the liberty to choose for myself the flowers that I love so dear, the flowers that I love so dear. The gardener was standing by, and I asked him to choose for me. He chose for me the violet, the lily, and the pink, and of those I refused all three, and of those I refused all three. The violet I did not like, because it fades too soon. The lily and the pink I really overthink, so I vowed I would wait till June. So I vowed I would wait till June. In June there is a red rose bud, and that's the flower for me. It's oftentimes I've plucked at that red rosebud and gained the willow tree, and gained the willow tree. The willow tree will twist, and the willow tree will pine. It's oftentimes I've wished that I was in that young man's arms who first had the heart of mine, who first had the heart of mine. Oh, come all you false young men, do not leave me here to complain. It's oftentimes the grass that's been trampled underfoot. Given time, it will rise again. Given time, it will rise again. So I don't know. I am supposed to let people ask questions. Um, but if you want, I can just uh, carry on with. Um,
We can have the questions at the end, Kate, because it's just lovely to
okay,
listen to you and get into the
okay. Thank you,
It's
music.
Linda.
it's
Always,
absolutely
always
wonderful.
encourage.
Just keep going, please. Yeah, lovely.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and then the thing is with that song is it's like there's a couple more songs that I know quite well that are similar to that I think um I mean I think they can be sung by either gender, but on the other hand they're very singable for women to help women not get tangled into too many knots. But of course the symbolism is so beautiful, um and on that particular song there's a message of hope that finishes the song. Now there's a song, and I started singing it with Liz Porter, who I've told stories with before. We researched it again well, that was at the Cecil Sharp House Library, and at the time it's called The Blind Beggar of Bethnal Green. And at the time, um, we um, we sort of were trying to find this song. I think Liz had been the one who'd known about it, and the man running the library said to us, "Well, which version do you want?" And we said, "Oh, how many are there?" And he said, "Well, there are 89 versions."
Ooh.
So when you go researching a song, you have to narrow it down somewhat. Anyway, um, this version is. I'm just gonna. I think I'll try and find a note so that I. Yeah. Mhm. I'll start there. And because the first, I think I'm not mistaken, the first gig I did with Innovisions was in Bethnal Green. I thought I'd sing this song at this gig that Innovisions did at Rich Mix, and it is interesting the way it's possibly quite a short version of a ballad. And in ballads, you sometimes get repetitions, a bit like the last song where you get kind of half choruses and things. You also get huge gaps in the storyline, and you have to kind of fill them in for yourself, unless you want to write other verses, or some experienced singers will cobble a few different versions together. Anyway, The Blind Beggar of Bethnal Green. There was a blind beggar and he lost his sight. He had but one daughter, most beautiful, bright. Shall I seek my fortune, dear father, said she, and the favour was granted to pretty Betsy. She set off for London, as I have heard say, and arrived in Romford the very same day. And as she came to my lord's house, most handsomely admired was pretty Betsy. She had not been there for no length of time before a young lord a courting her came. Your clothes will be lined with jewels, said he, if you will but love me, my pretty Betsy. It's all for to do it, I'm willing, said she, but you must first ask the father of pretty Betsy. Oh, who is your father, pray tell unto me, and I will go with you, your father to see. My father is every day to be seen. He is the blind beggar of Bethnal Green. He is the blind beggar, God knows, said she. He's been a good father to pretty Betsy. Oh, who is your father, pray? The blind beggar's daughter, my lady can't be. A blind beggar's daughter, no lady can be. A blind beggar's daughter, my lady shan't be. And scornful he turned from his pretty Betsy. If you're a blind beggar, then up spake a squire with riches unknown. If you're a blind beggar's daughter, you're never the worse. Your clothes will be lined with jewels, said he. If you will but love me, my pretty Betsy. Your daughter's not clothed as fine as can be, but I will drop guineas for her, said he. He dropped and he dropped them to the ground. He dropped until he had dropped £10,000. Oh dear honoured father, I've dropped all me store, I've dropped all me riches, I can't drop no more. But grant me this favour, for that's all I crave, that I might be married to pretty Betsy. Oh, take her and make her your lady so bright. There's many an earl who will owe you great spite, but when you are married, I will lay you down 10,000 bright guineas to buy you a gown. So Billy and Betsy to church they did go, and Billy and Betsy they made a fine show. The most beautiful creature that was ever seen was the blind beggar's daughter of Bethnal Green. Now, the thing about Blind Beggar's Daughter, I find, is that there's sort of social commentary. It's probably um, a very old song, because certainly when Cecil Sharp was collecting, I don't know if it was one of the ones he was collecting, but um, the oldest one that was put a date to was 1657. But once you start putting dates to things, there's probably several centuries before. And it's worth noting, and I'm not going to expand on this because I'm not an authority on Shakespeare, but Shakespeare is actually packed full of folk references and folk material. And that's partly because in his day, um, folk story and song would have been the pop culture of the groundlings who would go to the Globe for shows. And there's an absolute authority on this. It's a story. There's a man called Pat Ryan. He's a storyteller, and he's written books on this, and he's actually fascinating about it. So it's worth following that up if that interests you. Now, a bit of social comment on today's world. Um, I'm going to uh, sing a song that I enjoy singing. I thought I'd better think of something green to sing about because we're talking about St. Patrick's Day, but this is still a very English song. However, I fall into two categories of people um, who actually get annoyed by comments and responses sometimes when you're going along the street. I suppose the one thing about lockdown is there's a slight, you don't need to worry too much about such things. Anyway, this is about a young woman's encounter. The song is by Sandra Kerr, who herself is an incredible singer songwriter of her own songs, other people's songs, traditional songs, brilliant English concertina player, and she also runs voice workshops and choirs. I do the occasional voice workshop, but she is somebody that I've learned hugely from. So um, A young woman's walking down the street one day, when above the bustle and the noise, she hears a voice shout, "Hey!" and she hears him say, "Hello, darling," in a husky kind of voice. "What a drag, what a bore," she says, "I'll ignore it," when suddenly she hears a croak. She stops, turns around, and there on the ground is a little green frog who spoke. And he said, "Whoa, look at that, you're gorgeous, you are. Give us my love, don't be sad. I could really fancy you, but you can make sweet music if you'd like to come up to my pad." She says, "I don't like your chat at all, we're quite incompatible. Mother's morning I must heed." She says, "You're all cunning breeders, and the last thing I need is 1,000 foggy mouths to feed. So leave me alone, crawl back underneath your stone," she said, "to make the frog feel small. But it's no use trying cutting someone down to size when they're 7 centimeters tall." He says, "Go on, harangue me. You're lovely when you're angry. You really turn me on," he sighed. He says, "I know it sounds soppy, but I like my women stroppy." She said, "I like my froggies fried." "Enough merry quips," he says, and puckered up his lips in a manner that was quite obscene. She said, "I'm not about to snog with a completely strange frog. Besides, you're squidgy and you're green." His eyes undressed her, it really depressed her. "I'm losing my cool, go on, stop it." She said, "Get back to your pool, you amphibious fool. I'm losing my cool, go on, up it." He said, "I must apologise. Can't you see I'm in disguise? In fact, I am a nice young man. And I'm not feeling well, I've been put under a spell. In fact, I am a nice young man. Take me home to your bed, lay me down by your head. One kiss and then your prince will come." She said, "It's not worked before, and if it does, I'm sure your story won't convince my mum." Well, she took him back home and said, "I must just use the phone to discuss this matter with my friend." He said, "Return soon, my sweet, and make our lives complete. One kiss and then as one we'll blend." She went off for a chat, and when she came back, she said, "Your vowed love I must refuse." She said, "We both thought about it, and neither of us doubted that a talking frog would be more use." And I dedicate
Hey,
that to my computer. Um, so, um, and so now, oh, I won't put my concertina away because I'm going to start the tuney bit with, I'm going to play you, in the 18th century, there was a prominent blind musician in Ireland who used to travel around the courts playing his harp, and he's called Tulla O'Carolan. And this is a tune that he wrote called Shebeg Shimor, which means, I think it means Big Hill, Little Hill. Um, so anyway, Downstairs. Yes. So that's he wrote a lot of really kind of stately tunes like that. I'm just about to get my fiddle out. One I should have done earlier, as they say. And while I'm doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got involved in Irish fiddle music. The I I learnt the violin at school, but it was it's just one of those things where, particularly in those days, the special school system for blind people, if um, if you were um, at a boarding school, or in my experience, if you learned an extra instrument, it had to be something that had to be extracurricular. And of course, there were no orchestras that you were um, encouraged to join because you couldn't read the music. Well, so I did a few associated board exams. And in a way, when I was at college, I took up the guitar instead of the fiddle. And then it was a mixture of several things. I'd heard about um, Cecil Sharp House and that they play people could play for dancing. And as long as I'm in tune with myself, I have to be careful with the Innovisions. There's a few people with quite good ears in them. Uh, and and there was a mixture of things that were going on in London in the early 90s. One of which I think River Dance really gave a revival to, because the thing was actually that the folk revival, the folk song revival that happened in the 50s and 60s in this country post war, in a way when people were reworking and reclaiming a lot of the folk material that Cecil Sharp House had collected. Cecil Sharp had collected, and he died in 24. And then the Cecil Sharp House Library, which is dedicated to Vaughan Williams, they collected a lot of material. And in the 50s and 60s, lots of people reworked folk song to make it much more of a social uh, scenario without so much precious cultural weight put on it. And so you got musicians like, well, it was when in the States, people like Bob Dylan were getting famous, and people like Martin Carthy and the Watersons and all sorts of people, but people like that were getting well known here on the folk circuit. And at that point, a lot of um, Irish people in London who travelled to London for work and so on were building up their own sort of cohort of wonderful musicians, and possibly becoming able to travel back to Ireland to sort of join with the culture going on there, which had never stopped. And in the 90s, anyway, I think, in a way, think something like Riverdance kind of created this explosion of everybody wanting to play the fiddle. And there's this wonderful teacher called Pete Cooper, who's probably teaching at this very minute. I know he teaches on Wednesday evenings. And he got me very inspired. And uh, my fiddle playing is normally for within groups of other players. I don't normally play it much on my own. But I'm going to play a jig by O'Carolyn. You don't actually hear them. You don't hear them played. You don't hear O'Carolyn's jigs played much. But I was taught one at a summer school in Milltown Malby, well, in the village nearby there called Spanish Point, and that was started by the Clancy brothers, who were a musical family and wanted to promote Irish tunes. I think it was taught to me by somebody called Charlie Lennon, who's a Northern Irish musician. Also, the other thing about Irish playing is that it varies hugely from different county to different county. And also, anyone coming in who hasn't been brought up with it from the year dot will never be, your highly talented Irish player. Um, oh, but I must fit in one thing. The player Martin Hayes, who comes from East Clare, plays a beautiful lyrical style and done things with jigs and reels that other people haven't done or have done in a different way. Anyway, he um, was once a part of a festival to do with um, the Radio 3 program that they called The Genius of the Violin. And every time he turned on the radio, he heard these wonderful classical musicians play extraordinary virtuosic things. And we all went along to the Irish Centre in Hammersmith, and the chairs were all laid out formally. And he was recording for Radio 3, and he opened by saying, "Well, in County Clare," he said, um, the thing that marks you out as not being a genius is playing the fiddle. That really, that's the last thing you would be if you played Irish music. It's very much a communal thing that you play for dances or in pubs and so on. Anyway, this is I can't remember what this tune is called, but it's by Fella O'Carolan. So, so that's an example of a jig by Tuller O'Carolan. Um, and I'm going to play you two more jigs, and they're ones that I learnt in different settings. The first one I uh, learnt from a tutor in a music community in West Clare near Kilfenora and Lisdoonvarna, and it's called the Bog Hill Centre. And you go there and you eat vegetarian food and you learn Irish music from um, local artists. And the funny thing was, when I went there on a couple of occasions in the 90s, there were all these people from the London fiddle classes that I was going to, and we'd all turned up for the same course, and none of us realised it. So it was like it's sort of when you do that kind of thing, it's like being in heaven for a week. Um, uh, but anyway, so one of the jigs is called Rose. I think it's called Rose Among the Heather, a bit like that Schubert song. Very different material though. And then the other tune is called Out on the Ocean. Or I might just decide to do the Kesh jig, which I've known for ages. I might do that. I'll decide anyway. So starting with the Rose Among the Heather. And so there's a few jigs and things. I think one of the things that happens with Irish music is that there's a kind of there are styles and so on that are very distinct. But one of the things that is very different between Irish and English music is the ornamentation. There's certain things that you kind of do while you're playing Irish music, whether it's suddenly kind of making little trebles in the bow, or I don't know, you can replace three notes in succession with a little ornament. Um, they call them cuts and rolls and things like that. And while I'd put it, it'd be very hard put to the test to actually describe what's going on. I remember once I never got advanced enough with classical music to really go into the sort of um, mordants and the podritures and all the things that they do in that. But similarly, it's something that provides variety or somehow um, pins down a style that replaces maybe what you might regard as the strictly written notes. So, and I remember hearing this analysis of some ornamentation that Mozart would have put on a tune, and the principles were the same, that you find something, a little frill, a little kind of highlight that makes you listen to the music in a different way, or kind of almost like provides a bit of improvisation within a framework or something like that. Um, and but these things can get very competitive in Irish music, and that in fact um, there's a debate. I used to, sadly, I heard he died recently, but there was a fiddler called Brendan McGlinchey who didn't do great things in terms of being that well known, but he felt that people shouldn't be uh, restricted and made to do certain ornamentation in certain ways. Whereas there is an actual examining board um, uh, which um, does, try to prescribe young people learning things in particular ways and doing things or doing particular bowings or ornamentation, and not different to classical music. And it's not whether one's good or bad, but that it's basically, I think, with any kind of music, it's whether what you are taught um, adds to adds to how you can play it and what you can give to the music. So there you go. There's all those kinds of things that go on, and of course there's hornpipes and reels and all different kinds of hornpipes are sort of diddly dumpy 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 dum, that kind of. I'm kind of rushing because partly because I quite like to explain a little about my concertina, um, and reels are very quick. Uh, and so if I play a reel, I won't play it up to speed, but my goodness, when the dances get going in Irish music, they're quite something and quite pacey. There's a reel that I do like called The Drunken Landlady, and I was checking it out on the internet actually, and the funny thing is, somebody said this is The Drunken Landlady, and it's definitely based on the Pigeon on the Gate. So you get these tunes that almost possibly turn into other tunes. Um, and so, at the risk of sounding a bit like I'm sorry I haven't a clue and turning one tune into another, I might just give you a little go at that. The Drunken Landlady. I sound a bit like a drunken landlady when I'm playing it, or not even a landlady. So I won't continue with that. But it's these things are deceptive because the notes are very they're engagingly sort of, I hesitate to use the word simple, but they're easy possibly to look at on the page, but to, work up into a kind of dance feel, they're very different and very special. So, would people like to hear a little bit about, while I'm intrigued about the concertina, the particular one I play?
Yes, please. I would.
Oh, that's nice. It's nice that people are saying yes and being, yeah, that's great. Right, I sure. And I also realised this concertina I am playing is green, which is ever so appropriate this evening, isn't it? Really. Um, and it's a Haydn concertina, and it was invented by someone who I think is still around. It was when there's an organisation of concertina players who call themselves the they call themselves the West Country Concertina Players, and I got introduced to them by a wonderful musician and singer called Sandy Easton, who sadly died a few years ago. He was a Scottish musician, and but anyway, um, he helped me discover all about concertinas. Now, the amazing thing about concertinas, they can be very complicated. Wheatstone, who invented the English one, tried to make the instrument so that it played very much so that the buttons on each side of the instrument coincided with the lines and gaps on a stave, on a musical stave. And then there's an Irish style of concertina playing where they use what English people call the Anglo Concertina, where I mean, in its basic sound, it sounds like a mouth organ being blown and sucked, because when uh, you push it in and out, it plays different notes for the in and the out, which takes some learning. But that's it's very impressive that Irish players play a really good, beautiful concertina for dance music, and so do they for Morris tunes as well. And this is a duet concertina, this Haydn, but um, this man Brian Haydn, he said he was in a band and he wanted to be able to play in every key, but not have to learn a different configuration for each key. And what he managed to do was, as a rule, from the keys of C to B, without the sharp and flat keys, he managed to make it so that all over the instrument, um, each scale is worked out in the same way. Um, the concertina is a, oh my goodness, I just realised, yeah, it's either hexagonal or octagonal. I think this one's octagonal. This is a really special one. I discovered, oh no, it's not. It's seven-sided. My goodness. A seven-sided concertina, one for each of the keys that were playing easily. Anyway, and this is quite a unique instrument. It's got quite a story attached to it. But basically, um, in any key uh, if you play, so that's the first three notes of a major scale, and then you go away from yourself for the next row, and you play four more notes, and then you get back to the keynote on the. And what happens with that is it's sort of hard to when you're talking about describing things. Um, what it means that every chord you play has exactly the same shape. So you've got um, notes 1 to 3. So in C, that means C to E, um, forming the base of a triangle. And then the top of it is the G. And that kind of chord, um, wherever you play it on the instrument, it's exactly the same shape, playing the same chord. And also, if you play a minor chord, there are two notes that form the top edge of the tray is like that the same shape, but the straight edge is on top and it points downwards, so you can play major chord and go down to a minor one, and it just means that whatever key you're in, you can find a similar shape of chords, and so if you play the chords in a different with the notes in a different order without the bass note and having the third note at the bottom of the chord, whatever you do, that particular chord will be the same shape all over the instrument. And so it's really ingenious. And what this guy didn't point out to me is that if you are into music theory and you know where the semitones come in the scale, each time there's a semitone, assuming you're in the keys from C to B, if you go up a row, it's always at the point where there's a semitone. And so that again is another, it just fascinates me. This concertina that I'm playing at the minute, as I say, it's a duet concertina, so exactly the same thing goes on the left hand side, but it's lower notes. And this concertina is larger than some, which is really nice. It means you can vary your pitch when you're playing in harmony and things. But there's all those buttons, and when you're in the middle of one of the side of them, you can get very lost. Says she. So yeah, so that can happen. But anyway, it is. I really like it because if I was playing an accordion, I'd have to choose chords that are ordained by the instrument itself. When you open one button, it will open three reeds and a chord comes out. So that's another good reason for playing any concertina. So anyway, I don't know if I've rambled on for long enough.
So can we have some questions? Does anybody want to ask Kate any questions? You can unmute yourselves.
If you can unmute yourself.
All I can say, Kate, the way you have said yourself, have I babbled enough? That the way you have babbled, if I could, everybody will be dazzled. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Well,
And actually, I have seen this concertina, and I'm very proud to say that when you came to show me, and such a small instrument, you can play wonderfully well, and I'm very very happy to uh, listen to you playing all these two instruments and singing as well. Sounds wonderful. And I really enjoyed the folk style because in India we don't have da 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 da, very straight, and here da 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 da, da and the whole octave, a whole range of the instruments is covered in such a way, and it's mostly da 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 da. These kind of combinations coming, and also
yeah,
minor different ways.
partly what I was going to say about the blind beggar, Belugi, it's an example of the many much more sort of modal tunes. That a lot of the kind of when you dip into folk, you hear, as you say, the sort of majory arpeggios, but there are far more modal tunes out there.
Of course, there are, yes.
Yeah, so
Also, I really enjoyed one piece you sang and played concertina as well, but it in different kind of harmonies. I really appreciate that, and also talking. While you're talking, you were also in the rhythm, and that's amazing for me. I can't do it.
well, I think when people are doing when people are used to singing songs and playing things, um, but I can't do an awful lot. In fact, I kind of feel very much. Um, I find it the whole thing about being in, well, a member of Innovisions and being invited to do this is really special for me because I know, uh, as far as I'm concerned, Beluji, you're both an outstanding musician and you get other people who are outstanding as well. And I found, for example, that Ziad, think I could have gone on listening to Ziad's Arabic music talk last time. I was deeply fascinated, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to discover where each of us are at, as well as for other people to come along.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
to me, I would say that this corona has given this kind of facilities that we can even playing solo concerts. Unfortunately, we couldn't play together. Orchestra, we keep saying orchestra, but it's a solo part of the orchestra. That's wonderful. We can play the whole 1 hour solo and talk about it as well. Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah, it's a wonderful
yes, it,
opportunity to
Explore.
actually listen to individual members of the orchestra and get to know more about their musical journeys and the place that music has in their life.
and and the other thing that interests me is that kind of it forces me to focus on things in a way that I wouldn't. So even if I'm not coming out with anything new from the point of view of the experts, it's getting me to think about things. And one of the things I was going to say was we all know the very well known song, or the tune certainly, London Derriere. Da 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 da. What
Yep.
people don't realise is that was published in 1912,
Oh,
but
yes.
it was collected from somebody in County Derry. It was collected from somebody called Jimmy McCurry, who was a blind fiddler, and presumably from the streets in Derry, or the county Derry anyway, in a small town, and the poor man died in the workhouse in 1912, in the year that tune was published, um,
Mm.
possibly under somebody else's name. And I sometimes think the social reflection is worth going into. There's not time to analyze that too much, but that's another thing that um, and I was told that by an Irish storyteller called Len Graham. So it's wonderful when these little bits of information come up, I think.
Hello, Kate.
I think
Can
it's
I ask a
amazing.
question?
I think it's Terry here. I think it's amazing, Kate, how you remember all the words. Some of the long songs or long stories.
Well, I don't always remember my words, do I, Terry? And you're very good at Terry's a really good singer and remembers all your words when you do something. And
My songs are a lot shorter than yours, though.
well, anyway, it's
Kate, hi, everybody.
oh, hello, Ziad.
Yes, it's a wonderful evening. A lot education stuff is very good. Now, what I'd really like to ask you about is two things. First of all, what's the name of the instrument you were playing, and can you describe it for us, please?
Yeah,
Well,
the concertina it's a seven. They vary in size and shape really, but they've usually got more than four sides. They're like they've got a bellows in the middle of them, and then there's two sides facing outwards where your fingers are sort of over the buttons.
Is
Which
that
have
similar to melodica?
no, well, a melodica's got like buttons in the shape of a keyboard, haven't they? Like
Yeah.
a Western piano keyboard. And this has
Mm,
just got like rows of buttons. So each
okay.
side of the bellows, there's a sort of case for the reeds, each side of it, and then on that you get these buttons that all work separately, and they're in I mean, to all intents and purposes, it just feels as if they're in a big group. And when I was talking about these triangles, you learn to pick out where they are on the instrument. Um, And like with when you're playing, you know, like when you're playing your oud, you know, you get to know very instinctively
yeah.
what
But
shape your fingers
does it
need to
have
go.
a reed as well? Reed.
Yeah, it has reeds. I mean,
Okay.
so when you press the button in, it opens the reeds. Yeah, and that is like an octa, obviously.
Okay. But no, when I said reed, I thought
But they're not like
you blow it
keys.
with your mouth.
No. It's a squeeze box. It's like in that sense, it's like an accordion.
Accordion.
But it's
Okay.
a concertina. Everyone thinks of it as they say, "Oh, Kate, you play the accordion, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't play the accordion. I play the concertina." But everybody gets it out of that. But accordions have a button where you press one button and it would say go, you know. So it means you can't change it to a if you want or a, you know.
Okay.
So
Wow.
whereas with this, you can take any, you know, you can play a tune simultaneously in completely different keys. And,
Yeah. It's
make
so
it so
interesting.
good.
And talking of keys, can I make a request, please?
Well, I don't know if I always answer requests.
All right, I'll try my luck. How about
Yeah.
Molly Malone?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, but
Make it
I mean, I don't know how much time there is left. I mean, everybody does know. In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I fasten my eyes on sweet
Molly Malone.
as she wheels her wheelbarrow,
Barrow,
Broad
reason,
and narrow, like
crying
muscle,
cockles and
I,
muscles.
oh,
Alive, alive,
I've a life, oh,
alive,
I've a life, oh,
alive.
muscles and muscles and life.
and look at the
Amazing,
shouting
amazing,
like
amazing.
Harry's
Hey,
concertina.
Thank you, so amazing.
And father before,
There she will.
he will dip arrow, broad and narrow, muscles and muscles
Alive, alive, oh.
Yeah.
alive, cockles and muscles,
yeah, you sound like a Johnny Drunk.
Okay, because it's
died of a fever.
she died of a fever.
No one could
No
save
one
her,
could save her.
and that was the end of sweet Molly.
Thank
And the
Streets broad and
streets narrow and
narrow,
narrow.
in muscles and muscles,
And
alive, alive, oh, alive, oh, cockles and muscles, alive,
muscles alive,
alive, oh.
alive.
Hello, Alan.
It's
Okay,
funny because
that was very interesting.
That was
Interesting
a
zooming.
totally original mixing of.
The zoom.
Totally different. Love it.
a song like that, you really can't go wrong, can you? So it doesn't matter if you're unmuted.
There are
Only
some.
only to be heard in lockdown.
Yeah,
That's right,
a
Al.
lockdown version.
A lockdown
What
version.
you
Now, I've
don't
got some, Kate, there are some messages on chat I can read out to you if you would like to know what they are. Somebody called Lisa said Sandra was the voice of Madeline, the rag doll in Bagpuss.
This is true.
And then from Ali Williams says, I love, and I'm not sure about this pronunciation on my part, I love Sibheg Seymour. Thank you.
Shimor, yeah, that tune, yeah.
Yeah.
And Ali is a very, very good friend of mine. Thank you, Ali.
And Sarah Oak says, I really liked that one, sounded lovely. I think that was the one you were playing on.
Well, that one that Ali mentioned, the Shebeg Shmore. Anyway,
yeah, I think
that was
that's
nice.
it, yeah.
Oh.
And then Ali says, thank you, that was great. And Oscar says, Linda, can you read out these comments for Kate? And then I said, I will.
Yes, I can.
So I have.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, and thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Has just joined. You know, I'm going to call Jaws my talking frog from now on, because I left it on because when I was playing, I could hear people, so and so has left the meeting, so and so has joined the meeting.
Well, we've had a lot of so-and-sos.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, you got me out of a spot about doing Molly Malone as the ad, because I hadn't prepared an Irish song, and then I thought of a really lovely one, but
It sounded
I
really
don't know
great.
if I can get
Thank
through
you
it,
very
so
much.
maybe I'll leave that for another time.
Oh, could we have that one as well, please, Kate?
Oh, is that Maggie?
Hi, yeah.
Ah, well, you probably know it, Maggie.
We'd like to hear you.
Shall I be?
Promise we won't join in.
Shall I be really indulgent?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
go
we'll
for it.
mute.
It's as I came home on a Monday night, as drunk.
Hey.
Oh, you know it, Terry.
Some of it.
A horse.
Well, I said to my
No, I
wife,
don't think I can do it. I won't do it because it's better if I get to know it. But what the Dubliners say, it's the 7 drunken nights. And the thing is, it made me smile because, obviously, because he's drunk, he doesn't see exactly. No, he thinks he sees something, and it's always described by his wife as something else. So I reckon that he's got Charles Bonnet syndrome. So I thought it fitted in.
No, he's just drunk.
Yeah, that's right, Terry.
Well, you can perform it live, and everybody can come and hear it on June the 18th at St John's Waterloo when you'll be performing.
I'm not in the June the 18th one, Linda.
Yes, you are, Kate. I left you a message.
Oh, good. All right. Okay.
And also, Kate is playing on June the 26th in a trio with Blue and Abby Baker.
And she's a super fiddler. If you need some good fiddling, Abby is
Oh yes,
just brilliant. So yeah.
Thank you everyone for coming, and please join us on the 31st of March to hear Kevin and his guide to Latin American music.
Hey,
Thank you. Kate, before you go, people, I just want to say, Kate, you are talking about the 7 drunk night for Dublin, yeah?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, let's make it 8, because one more night for Johnny the Drunk. That's from my side.
Yeah. And then we'll have 1,001 nights,
Cool,
one thing I was just asking, Linda, if people have to unfortunately miss any of these wonderful shows and bits and pieces, are they able to see it on YouTube?
Well, we're recording all these sessions, and they'll all go up on blind.tv.
Fantastic.
And
no, it's just nice to know, so that
absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, well, anyway, thank you so much, and
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you, Kate.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.